I mean, or two. The building's okay. Yeah.
Hopefully not get
Building
sweaty.
is up the house. So, and we are
Scary for sure.
finishing up third party investigation or assessment. They be kind of crunch or like eating, not rushing.
So parents are a total.
It's hard.
Parents are a total group. I just like some church callings that involve like the parents.
Everybody, we're really glad to have everyone here. Please continue to get your food. If you haven't gotten any, grateful for Don Chewy's for providing the food tonight. We got a District 2 restaurant that provides food for us. So we're glad for that. My name is George Handley. I'm the current occupant of District 2 on the City Council. I'm stepping down this year and very excited to with you to get to know these three candidates who are running for the seat. We're going to try to do this without microphones because it's a little better for the recording. But if anyone in the room can't hear very well, please let us know, and we do have microphones that we can use. They'll be given a set limit of time to answer the questions, and I'm going to rotate the order in which they answer the questions. I've got questions prepared, and I'll go through some of those, and then we'll open it up to any questions you have. I know some were pre-submitted, so we have those. But you may also think of things as you're listening that you want to ask. Okay. So I'm just excited to do this because I believe so much and so passionately in city government. I think local government is an absolutely wonderful place to be. It's a great opportunity to do good in our community, and Provo has a wonderful culture of civic engagement. I always feel like it could be better. I always feel like people could vote more and be more aware of local elections. And so I congratulate you and thank you for being here tonight because of your interest. And I hope that after tonight, you'll carry your perspectives and your feelings to your neighbors and encourage them to get to know these three very fine candidates. So I'm going to start by just asking each of them to share a little bit about who they are and what core values motivate you to want to run for the city council. Okay, I'll give you 3 minutes each, and maybe we'll just start right here with Hannah.
Well, I first want to thank George for organizing this and for his service. He's been fair and he always listens to other people. And I know that he's organized this because he loves us and he loves our community. My name is Hannah Petersen. I'm a long-term resident of our district. I've lived here 38 years out of my 48 years. Went to elementary school, junior high, graduated from TIPU, went to BYU. I'm a mom. I'm here with my 2 children. My parents are here. My sisters are here. So my family's been here for some time. I have served as in the neighborhood for about 10 years, either on the executive board or in the neighborhood program. I was the Southeast area vice chair. I've served on zoning committees and all types of committees. So I've been pretty consistent for 10 years. My profession is I started my first business here in Provo, but my profession is I am an environmental planner. I am a landscape architect and I have started my own business and run my own firm. That is my passion, is building sustainable, beautiful communities. And I have some experience in that area. My core values of why I'm running. Having been involved for such a long time, one thing that I have noticed is that the city council members' vote impacts my family's life significantly. More so than sometimes state leaders' votes or even national leaders' votes. My city council member affects my life. It affects my street, my neighborhood, and the trajectory of our entire community. And I'm passionate about that. And as I've served here for a long time, I've noticed that I am so grateful when a city councilor recognizes and respects my voice and our voice in a community, because there's a really powerful effect when they respect us. So I'm running on that core value, which is I am always going to be loyal to my constituents. to their voice, to their opinions. I'm not running for my own political agenda. I'm not running for any other reason other than I am passionate about the effect of collaboration and hearing everybody's consensus. I'm also passionate about Provo, and I recognize that we are growing quickly and there are a lot of changes coming to our community. And so I want to be a strong voice for the quality of life that we must protect. The Olympics are coming in a few years. I am passionate about our canyons. I'm in them on a weekly, daily basis. It's been a love affair I've had with Provo for a long time. And so you will see a lot of my core values based around conserving our natural resources and doing something proactive as we grow forward. You'll also see me, like I said, talking about neighborhood voice. I'm very passionate about raising the bar in our development in our community, only because, like I said, landscape architect, coming from that perspective, I just want to make Provo beautiful and want everybody.
Thank you. I guess we're standing while we introduce ourselves. First, thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. There's a lot of things you could be doing right now. I just love a lot of respect for the time it takes to come out and come listen. I also want to thank Rachel Breen for getting us food and all the work you put into doing this, and also George. So a little bit about myself. My wife and I, we were living in Uganda in 2016, and I was working on a business out there, a small business that was called Safe Boda, and they have a lot of these motorcycle taxis in Uganda where they kind of get around using motorcycle taxis instead of Ubers, and it's very unsafe. A lot of people were getting in car accidents, and a lot of people didn't wear helmets. So we started a company that basically made sure everyone had a helmet for themselves, the driver, and then the person riding on the back, and we trained them in road safety. And then when we were out there, my wife got pregnant, and we decided we didn't want to have our baby in Uganda, and we wanted to come back to the United States. And so we had, at that point in our life, we had lived in Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and we said, okay, where do we want to go? And we decided to come back to Utah and make it our home. And she went to her BYU MBA, and I started a business that I'm still running to this day. It's a software business with about 15 people. And we decided to come back to Provo and make it home because we love it. We love the people, we love the mountain, we love the canyons, we love the river, and we love the BYU student community. And we're really glad we made that decision. We've absolutely loved it. I'm someone who I always like to get involved wherever I am. And so 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to get appointed to the Planning Commission, where I saw firsthand how decisions are made in the city and how those decisions affect people's lives. We had some very emotional meetings, one around Fuego Fridays, for example, where we were trying to the police were asking to revoke their conditional use permit, and that was a really difficult meeting. We had one with Rugged Grounds Coffee, that was a difficult meeting. And but as my fellow people on the Planning Commission saw how I handled those meetings, they nominated me and voted me to be the chair of the Planning Commission because of how I was able to deal with those challenging decisions and the way that I sort of processed information. The thing that motivated me to vote or to run for city council is I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I want to make Provo a great place for them and keep it a great place for them for the next 20, 30 years of their life. I think there are a lot of great things about the city, but there's also a lot of challenges with growth, with aging infrastructure, with our revenue situation. And we need people who have experience with planning and strategic planning to try and address those challenges instead of simply just kind of saying, let's keep things the way they are. Obviously, we want to keep what's great about Provo, but if we don't have a strategy to deal with the challenges, it'll degrade. And so the core values that motivate me as I'm thinking about running for this is 1, I really just love people, and I serve them and listen to them and do the best I can to create as great a community for as many people as we can. 2, I have a deep sense of fairness. And so anytime something feels fundamentally unfair, I want to try and understand what's going on and try to correct that fairness. And thirdly, I have a deep sense of responsibility. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. I am Sally Clayton. I have been in Provo for the past 8 years. I moved out here to Provo. My husband and I were living in California, which is where I'm from, and life sort of became unsustainable there. And we came to this place that is beautiful and gorgeous and has a great community and all of the things that we wanted for us and our family. And I think my only regret about moving to Provo when I did was that I did not do it sooner. The first time I came to Utah in 2011, I everybody told me like, you know, oh, if you're not part of BYU, then like don't move to Provo. And so I moved to Salt Lake. And now that I come here, I'm like, this is the most magical place. We have, you know, an amazing university here. We have an amazing community. I've lived in District 2 the whole time on the south side and sort of what I call town homeland. And that's what allowed us to come out to Utah in the first place and just be surrounded by great people there. And now sort of further north in our district and every single place we've lived, I found just the most amazing communities, whether they're retirees, whether they're BYU professors, whether it's BYU students. It's been a great experience here. I am running and I put my name down on the ballot because in my 8 years here, I just want to make sure that every single local office has phenomenal people. As soon as we sort of all listed our names down and I looked at it, I was like, we have a great race here. And I'm like, I honestly think you can't go wrong. This is a phenomenal race with qualified people. You know, I see myself as someone who is one, fair, two, passionate about really collaborating across different groups of people. You know, really sort of, I think a little bit tired of politics getting in the way of good government. I have a bachelor's degree in government from Harvard University. So way back when, have sort of some fundamentals and principles there back in my mind, although I couldn't articulate all the like old political philosophers today. It's been too far back. I spent the last 20 years in the nonprofit and corporate worlds. I came out here originally for sort of my first real job running a nonprofit. It's now called Humanitarian XP. Amazing program and experience. And then since then, I've spent the last 15 years or so working in the tech industry for companies like Adobe and Qualtrics here in Provo. I work for CFOs and I help them make companies efficient and figure out how to do spending and how to cut down on inefficiencies and just really help businesses run well. So a good fundamental background, I think, in some of the core principles that you need in good government. And I think a lot of the sort of business side of how to make things efficient. So I'm excited to be here with these sort of amazing candidates as well, and just grateful for all of you who are showing up and helping us engage in sort of civic discussion.
So we have some really wonderful people running for office, so thank you. Okay, so we'll go back to a 2-minute model. And this question will start with Jeff and then Sally and then Hannah. And the question is, and some of you already alluded to this a little bit, some of my questions are about character and some are about policy. I think character matters just as much, maybe more. So to be effective as a city council member, you need to learn how to get along with people who think very differently than you. Some of them may be on the council with you. Some of them may be staff members. They may be citizens. Give us an example of why you were especially qualified to get along with people who think differently than you. Yeah.
I'm going to try to talk sitting down, and if you can't hear me, please tell me and I'll stand back up. When I was 18 years old, I grew up in Gilbert. So I was born and raised a little bit in Provo. Then my family moved to Arizona, and I was in Gilbert, Arizona, a very conservative, religious Mormon community. And I got recruited to play football for a school called Occidental. It's a school that Obama went to in LA, and I was recruited to play football, and I got a good scholarship. And so I decided to go there. Didn't really think about the decision much, but just for a little bit, Occidental is about a 5,000 person campus. It's a liberal arts college in LA, and I was one of 2 members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was probably one of 10 Republicans at the time. And I just remember like my first week, people were, and this was around when Prop 8 was happening in California, and so people were very, very, very negative towards me. And during those experiences, I learned to listen to people and why they had certain assumptions about who I was and my character based on just external identifiers and markers, and I was able to help them see that I was someone who would listen to people, who would respect people. I fundamentally believe that everyone is acting in good faith, is smart, and make reasonable judgments based on their experiences. And with those 3 assumptions, you tend to be able to find common ground with people. And that's served me throughout my life, from that time as a young child through my career.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this because I was planning to say one of my superpowers was collaboration and sort of reaching across aisles to sort of listen to all. And the person I was talking to was like, I'm not sure that's going to like jive with people. But I really am passionate about it. I'll give you an example from my job. So if any of you have been in sort of the corporate world, you know that like CFOs are the enemy of a lot of the other sort of departments, right? So my job at work is actually to constantly tell salespeople no, right? Like, oh, sorry, no, you can't sell that deal. Like, it's not a great deal. Or no, you can't get commission for that. And I think that takes a lot of collaboration to, one, be able to foster respect among people where sort of your viewpoints differ. In this case, it's not maybe a political division, but you know, it's sort of like I work for a CFO who has like financial interests, maybe a sales rep is out there to try to push any deal through. And so it's always a balancing act. My daughter, who's back there on her iPad, so she's not listening, but she knows my favorite symbol is the yin yang, and we've got little yin yang charms. I wore it yesterday, but not today. And I think it's all about that balance, right? Like Jeff said, you need to be able to listen to anybody. Again, I think politics have divided us from being able to have good discussion. And so I think, you know, talking to people yesterday at the town hall, it was hard. Like there were people who came up and used this question of like, who did you vote for, to decide whether or not they could like love, support, or even hate me. And that was a really interesting experience. And I think we really need to move away from that, especially at the city level where, you know, these are nonpartisan elections for a reason, because that benefits all of us. So my superpower, I'd say, definitely is collaboration. I do it all day, every day, and trying to balance it at work and get a lot of experience with, I normally don't like telling people no either. So that's why I love my job, is it forces me to do that with people who have a different perspective, and I get lots of practice every day.
Well, I will use an example from our neighborhood that is kind of a hot topic. I was the neighborhood vice chair in 2018, and we received a phone call from Gary McGinn in the community development office and said, Hannah, you are the Southeast area vice chair and the neighborhood chair. You need to hold meetings and ask your neighborhood if they want to have a parking permit program. It's like, can you drive? Come on in for a meeting and we're going to tell you why you need to hold these meetings. And basically he told us, this neighborhood is going to be enforced on. We're looking at massive enforcement, or we're looking at a parking ban. And we think that maybe you should probably hold some meetings and ask the neighborhood what their input is. And I remember sitting there with Richard Holmes at the time, and both of us said, we do not want to hold those meetings. They told us it's just information gathering meetings. And we said, we don't want to hold it. That's going to be an absolute nightmare. But when it came down to it, someone had to do it, and I was willing to do it. And we held 11 neighborhood meetings throughout our community, and they were feisty. We had one where we had 50 people in my backyard, and I thought, we're never going to fit anybody. I borrowed all these chairs, I put them in my backyard. It started raining, so then we had to move into my living room. So not only is everybody frustrated, everybody is kind of slightly sweaty and damp and now steamy in my living room. But what I can say from that is that the goal was to collaborate and try and find a solution to keep something worse from happening. And we entered every single one of those meetings with frustration. And I have to say, we walked out having different opinions, but we were still friends. We were all friends. We got along better than when we started. And I would say that would be my superpower, is the ability to have a really, really hard conversation and to be brave enough to do it and to not get offended. Because someone's going to have those conversations. When the city says you need to hold this meeting, someone's going to have to do it. And I don't need to do it.
All right, thank you. Okay, this next question, we'll start with Sally. On the council, we've had to face a good number of very hard decisions in the past about potentially raising fees or property taxes for specific purposes. We've also had a city bond. When a city is contemplating trying to increase revenue in such a manner, what would be the principles and criteria that you would use to make a decision about any potential increase that would come out of the pocket of citizens?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm really into benchmarking, right? Like take a look at what we're doing compared to other places and other places that we maybe value. So when it comes to property taxes, I think we have to ask ourselves, are we efficient? And are we doing a good job with our property taxes in terms of price? So a couple of things. We are under half the national average for property taxes. We are under Utah as a state, and we're under the county. So I think there are some signals. I know there's been, and you sort of sent us a few questions about like, curbing the rise in property taxes. fairly newer to homeownership here, being in Provo for 8 years. And so it's not something that's sort of been the top of my list, but I think when you look at benchmarking, we're actually doing okay in terms of the efficiency of our property taxes. I appreciate the way you phrase this question, George, because on the flip side of that, we have in my neighborhood a lot of retirees, right? Anyone who's on any type of fixed income for whom, a small increase makes a huge, huge difference. So I think you also need to balance sort of the special needs of, your population and each individual one. So I'm glad to hear that those discussions have been challenging and thoughtful. That's what I would expect from my city council, is something like that impacts individuals in such, a clear way. And whether it's, the average increase that's happening right now of $90 across the year, which might not seem much when you put it down on a piece of paper. You have to be that level of thoughtful in it and understand, hey, each of these people or someone who is retired, well, how does that impact their day-to-day life? So I think benchmarking for me is huge. We have so much to learn from the communities around us, from our state, from our country. I think we can really utilize that to figure out where we're at and what are good ideas and what are bad ideas. And then I think you have to balance sort of what's on paper, right? So that'd be the argument of Provo looks pretty good with how does that impact individuals A, B, and C.
Well, I will agree with Sally. One of the things that I have learned from knocking doors and meeting people is how many people are concerned with their taxes. They say that, I guess I'm a little blindsided. I knew a lot of people were concerned about it, but it really is the primary issue for a lot of people in certain neighborhoods, how concerned they are. So we need to take any type of increase seriously, because there are a lot of people who are on a very, very tight budget. The principle I would look at is it a want or is it a need? And those need to be hard conversations that we need to have. Is it truly a want or is it a need? Because wants we need to be careful with, but needs we need to be bold, and we need to have the courage to go ahead and move forward. The other thing I look at is transparency and dialogue. A lot of people are frustrated when we talk about any type of increase or a hard decision. People are frustrated, but the more that you communicate, the more dialogue that there is, the more transparency that there is, I find that usually we all can kind of come together. Maybe there's a few outliers, but usually we can. And so I do think that I suspect that the more I can communicate, the more I can get your opinion, the more I can get your feedback and help us understand the situation, I think we can come to a consensus.
No, I think that's great. I appreciate the question. I'll echo also, as I've met a lot of residents in District 2, there's a lot of concern with inflation over the last 5 years and tax increases. I feel like a lot of people are feeling the burn, the wallet is stretched. And I think cost of living is an existential threat, honestly, to our society. It is a huge problem. It's probably the #1 problem in America. Obviously, at the city level, your scope of how to solve that problem is limited. But I still think there's things the city can do. So taxes is one, obviously, lever we can do to help solve the cost of living. But I think there's a lot more the city can do to help address the cost of living. And we'll get into it more in another question. But on a particular case-by-case basis, if I'm proposed for a tax increase, I think the first principle that I would look at is, as a government, is we get our power from the people. And as a representative of District 2, my first thing I would say, how would my constituents respond to this? How would they support or not support this? And try my best to understand that. The next principle I would look at is, if we don't do this now, will it cost us a lot more later? Oftentimes the politically expedient thing is to say no, and then make the next person pay a much, much higher bill. And I don't think that's good government, and I wouldn't do that. The next principle I would ask is, are there other sources? I think there are a lot of ways you can fund things beyond property tax increases. One of the things I think we need to do as a city of Provo is have a strategy to increase our sales tax revenue. It has been going down for the last 4 years. It's down 20% as people post-pandemic have shifted their shopping online. We've lost out on sales tax revenue, and so we need a way to address that. So that's the third principle. And then last and fourth and final principle I would ask is, who is benefiting from this? And I generally want to support policies that have a high return on the investment and have a broad base of who benefits. So those are the 4 principles.
All right, well, this will kind of pick up on that question. It's a little bit of an odd question because obviously when you're running for office, you want people to vote for you. But once you're in office, you may be in a situation, well, I would say you will be in a situation in which you feel very strongly that the right course of action is X, but most of your neighbors and friends are saying it's Y. And the one way to ask the question is, will you have the courage to go with your convictions, or would you go with the popular feeling? But maybe a different way to ask the question is, I'm gonna assume that you would all say, yes, I think I would have the courage to do what I think is right. But what I want is evidence. So I'd love to hear like an example of some time when you, and maybe not everyone in the room thinks that's an important principle, but my experience on the city council, I would vote for somebody who has the courage to vote against my wishes if it's based on good principle. So do you have some examples in your life where you've been able to resist clamor for one thing that you felt was just not right? The first one is Hannah, right? Yes.
Oh, is it?
I'm sorry.
Candidates to speak up just a little bit, like,
What's that?
can we ask the candidates to speak up just a little bit for those of us in the back?
Yes.
Stand up.
Should we
Stand up.
Raise the
Sounds
mic.
like standing up works. So stand up. Yeah. Okay.
It's a fantastic question. When to do something that's right, even when it's difficult, and I'm trying to think of a good concrete situation that would apply. I'm going to go to my professional experience in doing this in environmental planning and landscape design. There's been quite a few times when I did this in Colorado. I worked for about 10 years there. And oftentimes we would have situations where we would need to plan designs. We would need to stay within a certain budget. We were looking at malls, we would plan hospitals, we would design large communities. And a lot of times we would completely focus on the budget. But I knew that what the community needed and what they needed was they needed to have a little bit more sustainability. They needed to focus a little bit more on the environment. They needed projects that would be a little more beautiful. There were times when I had to go and sell a project and maybe I lost a little bit of money or I lost some revenue because I focused on what I knew the community needed most. So that's one example. But also as a neighborhood rep, there have been so many times where we have had discussions about conservation in the mountains, when we have had conversations about zoning changes, we have had conversations about, like I said, parking. We have had all of those conversations. But I have consistently done whatever I need to do to do what's right. But I will say this as a caveat, that most of the time what's right is what the residents are supporting. Usually when you've talked to good people in the community and you talk about their values and you talk about what their priorities are and you really get to understand them, you will find that often that is the right thing to do. So that is one of my core values, is not to assume that I'm always right or just assume that I know what's best. I think that the leadership that has been best in our community are the people who really do value and respect the priorities of the citizens.
Thank you. So it's a great question, George. Thank you. I'll give an example from a while back and then a more recent example. But first I want to start off by saying, as a representative, I think listening is very important and representing your constituency, not just your voters, but the whole everyone in your district. And I think if you find usually I feel like if you're explaining the reasoning, having a long discussion and listening to everyone in the constituency, hopefully this is a rare scenario. But a long time ago, early in my career, I was at a company and they were doing a big layoff. And I was the chief of staff to an executive and working on the layoff. And you go through all the different executives and they all have their lists. And there was one person on the list that we had just hired from BYU. She had started less than 2 months ago. And I was in this executive meeting with the CEO of the business and several executives. And I just said, I can't support this list. This is so unfair what we're doing to this person. She started here less than 2 weeks ago. They said, well, she was on the list and we run this whole business. And I said, I will not support this. If you make this cut, I am quitting. I'm not going to be part of this. And I got them to take her name off the list. That was a hard thing to do early in my career. I hadn't learned to find my voice and to stand up. Something I've done more recently that was actually a really, really hard decision that was part of this was actually deciding to withdraw from the Republican endorsement process. There's 4,000 of the 7,000 voters in our district are Republicans, and I felt like initially seeking the endorsement was a politically expedient thing to do. But as they asked me to sign a pledge that basically pledged to the Republican Party, I felt like it was fundamentally making the race partisan, and the race is nonpartisan, and so I withdrew from that process. It was a hard thing to do. Like I really, really struggled with that decision. I ultimately just had to do what I felt like was right. And if I lose the race because of it, so be it. But that was what I strongly felt like to do for the Provo residents.
Yeah, I actually called my mom today and told my mom about Jeff's experience with that endorsement. And, you know, my mom almost came to tears and she was like, okay, you need to go read. She loves JFK's book, Profiles in Courage, which I did not go. But that was really brave, like really, really brave. And I, you know, took a lot of sort of power from that. So yes, to George's question, I do believe that I will be able to do what's right, even when and if it is unpopular. I'll give you just maybe a bigger example and then just a tiny example from yesterday that I did sort of mention. But yeah, I do this all the time. I write a lot of policy at work. And policy is very unpopular. The one that I am going to push out next month to all of these very tricky sales reps that I get to work with and sort of keep in line is, hey, if your customers don't pay for the deals you sold, we're going to claw back your commission. And that's going to be very unpopular. And I'll sort of brace myself for that feedback and being the bad guy. Again, I really appreciated the last 10 years I've had working with CFOs because, you know, you get to be the bad guy, but you get to be in a collaborative and effective way. For me, in that situation, it's helping everybody understand the why, right? And when you can help someone understand the why of no, action is unpopular, it goes a long way. So I've learned a lot from that. And then just a quick example from yesterday. I think I mentioned this already, but you know, I had somebody come up to me and ask me, who did I vote for? And like knowing that my answer to that would probably vilify me for that person and, you know, probably lose me their vote if they're in our district. I don't know if they were, but I think it's, you know, it's important to do those things. And again, sort of, I'm fatigued from people giving the political answer. And again, it might not win campaigns and I'm okay with that because I'm here to stand up for what I stand for. And I understand how sometimes the right thing can be unpopular. Some of that is, you know, that sort of taking more information back and giving more information to the public. And I know I've been frustrated by that. And I think other people are frustrated by this, like, all I get is the answer and I don't understand the why. I think that's a huge part of that particular puzzle.
Thank you. All right. The city council developed a conservation and resiliency plan a few years ago, and it was then formally adopted for city planning purposes. Tell us a little bit about your feelings and level of commitment to that plan and what your qualifications are for helping the city to progress and grow in a way that is sustainable. And this starts with Jeff.
Okay. One of the things that have admired so much about your service is your commitment to good stewardship. I think it's a core value of mine that we all want to leave the place we live better for the next generation. And it's been amazing to see Provo, I think, lead out on that in a way that feels whole, but also balanced. And I'm strongly committed to continuing that. It's very important that we have good sources of energy, that we have clean air, and that we protect our public spaces. I think there's more we can do. And I think one of the things that is an asset to Provo is, like, a lot of times I think people in the discourse, particularly at the national level, we talk about there's like this conflict between good environmental stewardship and business. And I just think that's not often the case. People want to live in Provo because of how beautiful it is. They want to live in Provo because of the river and the lakes and the canyons. And I think the more that we recognize that, it can be a great source of our city also. As far as personal qualifications, I would say I just have love and passion. I think I share this with both candidates I spend a lot of time outdoors. Once a week, my time where I kind of get close to God and try to get inspiration and just find peace is by hiking in canyons and getting out in nature. And I think that is something that I deeply, deeply value. And I also my daughter is my daughter cares a lot about it, and she always gets after me when I walk by trash and don't pick it up. So that's my personal qualification.
Yeah, I mean, man, we have a special place here. I think we all know that. I mean, some of us came here like for the mountains. We have the rivers, we have the lakes, we have the canyons, we have it all. And that is so special and so precious and needs to be conserved and needs to be protected. I think in terms of like thinking about conservation, and again, it's this balancing principle, right? Government is all about balancing. It's about balancing development. Like we want to welcome development, we want to encourage development, and we being the government, needs to balance that in terms of protecting the land, protecting the resources that we have, protecting this beautiful place. I think in terms of like my qualifications, is I've thought a lot about sort of this dynamic between development and our spaces and our communities and the beauty of the nature. I'm a pretty good negotiator, and I think a lot of negotiation is really just understanding, and it's a little bit about pushing back. And I think it's this sort of, again, this balancing force that you have to have with development, where we both welcome it, but it has to be tempered, and you have to stick up for it, whether it's protecting Slate Canyon or Rock Canyon or whatever part we sort of treasure. I think that needs to be the force of the government, and you have to have sometimes the strength or the courage, like we've talked about, to be able to stand up and to back your resources and say, like, no, this proposal is not going to work, right? Like, yes, we do want these proposals and we do want this investment and development, but like, we say no as a city because that is our job, to say no to certain things, to be able to balance that. So I'd sort of position my qualification when it comes to conservation is the government is being the balancing force. The government is being your negotiator in terms of making sure that you are protected, your land is protected, all these precious resources that we have are protected.
This is a good question for me because it is my profession. I sell sustainability. I'm a LEED certified AP, and so you might not know what that means, but that is the highest certification you can get as a trained professional on how to build and promote and build sustainable cities and neighborhoods. So that has been my complete profession, is how to do it, and how to do it within a budget, and how to do it respecting people's agency, but how to sell it and make it beautiful. And we have never had that voice on the city council. George has been a big proponent of sustainability. He built the sustainability toolkit, and I am a huge supporter of that. But I think be the first professional that will come to the city council and say, I've done this for a living and I've done this for a long, long time. So this is definitely in my wheelhouse. I have also been an advocate for our canyons for decades. My first foray was when I was probably 19, and I tried to meet with the county commissioner to save South Fork. And during that time, so during the last 20 years, I have participated in service project after service project after service project in our canyons. I have planned demonstration gardens. I have tried to put bridges in locations. I have hauled out trash. We have done everything we can do. So this is a huge passion for me, and I'm coming with actions speak louder than words. One of the things I would like to do is, as a city council member, is to form a standing committee that might be based around this. We have committees of citizens that might be, like we have an arts committee that focuses on the arts. We have a transportation committee. We have a sustainability committee, but we do not have a standing committee for people that love the mountains and the canyons. And I would love to be an advocate to form that, so that we can, in the next 10 years, make sure that nothing is going through the cracks. All of our canyons are preserved. All of our mountains are preserved. Our rivers, our lakes. We have people who are passionate about those resources. They are on the committee. You will have mayors come and go, and you have council members come and go. The committee will keep it.
Right, thank you. So this is a little bit of a in the weeds kind of question, but I'd like, and I guess we start with Sally. I'd like to hear what tools you think we have, a city council has, to help with housing affordability, which is very high on everybody's worry list.
Yeah. I mean, I think the obvious tools that like we sort of formally have as city council are ability to impact zoning rules and regulation. That's I think a tool that's probably going a little bit unmissed, and I don't, know the specifics of the details, but collaboration with BYU, I just think is so important because if we're trying to do anything standalone as a city in terms of zoning and not collaborating with sort of the major institution that I think is impacting all the sort of zoning needs in terms of, sustainability of pathways and walking and where can people access and why is parking an issue because students have to live further away from school or from where they can buy their groceries than they would ideally like to. So there's a lot of power in these, these zoning sort of rules and regulations. I also think the reason why they're such a powerful tool, just depending on like what you're doing with these zoning laws is, it doesn't cost a ton of money to change zoning. I think it can be collaborative again with, there's these developers, we see all these like housing developments popping up everywhere. Developers want to come in and build here because, we have a growing population, we have a student population. It's a great place for them. I think collaboration between developers and collaboration with BYU are pretty powerful tools. On top of this, you can really play around with zoning restrictions and it doesn't cost a lot to sort of change zoning rules. There's other things that might, programmatic things where you have to pour a bunch of money into it. But I think that's one reason why playing around with, zoning is so powerful because it is pretty a low cost way to do it. And I think in terms of, what would it take to do smart zoning? It's both understanding the needs of the different groups, whether it's students or long-term residents, and then it's collaboration. We want to come in here and build and have their plans and making sure we're representing our city. And then collaboration with BYU, which I'd love to see a lot more of.
Okay, when my husband and I first tried to buy a house in Provo, we found a house in our district, District 2. We felt like the only way that we could have it be affordable is if it had a basement apartment. And this is 24 years ago. So imagine how it's gotten so much worse since then. Found out it was not legal in this district. And it was my own parents who turned me in, but whatever. I went to the zoning office. And there was an employee who was fantastic. He printed off for me a map of not only Provo City, but areas of Utah County. And he took his little highlighter and he highlighted every single area where I could have a legal accessory apartment. And he didn't stop there. He told me about parking rules. He told me what type of driveway I needed to look for. I'm 24 at this point in time. He told me about egress windows I need to have. I think he even referred to me a lender. That was a pivotal change for me and my husband because I took that little map and I said, okay, I can't have it right here in this district. But we drove around and we found a house and it was key to us getting into affordable housing. The mayor, we have a new website and we have a new mobile app. And I would love for a tool to have a huge, big, fat button right there that says, you need help finding affordable housing. This is how you do it. Here's a map of everywhere in Provo. Here's a map of everywhere in the county. These are the things that you need to look for. This is what your application is going to look like. These are all the different resources to get you there. I am the go-to person in my neighborhood and in my congregation. Whenever someone says, I've been renting forever, I can't get into a house, people say, go talk to Hannah. And that's what I do. I'm like, okay, let's sit down and I am going to help you do it. Because the reality is, in my opinion, yes, we have home affordability issues, but education and teaching people how to get that is something that we have to focus on as well as we work out all of the nuances of housing affordability. But I think we really we might have the potential to help hundreds of BYU students and young single professionals and people getting started if we can focus in the right direction, because the reality is that all of Utah County is zoned for this, for the most part.
Sorry, it's okay. Her bell didn't work.
Go off very loud. Sorry.
So 3 years ago, when I was looking to get more involved, I had several people close to my family who were younger trying to find housing. I remember one of my family members moved and they listed it and they had over 50 applications within the first hour. And as I saw my younger friends, because I'm the oldest of 7 kids, I saw my little brothers and siblings struggle to find housing. It really became something that I cared a lot about. And I started to look into it and I realized the median housing costs in Utah County is over $500,000, whereas our median income is about $60,000. That's an 8x difference, which is very, very large and one of the largest in the states. There was a recent map published just a few days ago, and we're number 3 in least affordable housing in the entire United States. And I totally hear the previous answers, but I'm just going to say, if we were to do that map is going to push all the way out into Payson and Nephi and Ganoche and all these places where we don't necessarily want students driving on. Yeah, I misspoke. Sorry. All the students driving into Provo, creating more traffic and more congestion. And so it's a problem that we actually really need to solve fundamentally. And in order to solve the fundamentals of the problem, you need to understand the dynamics. So this is something I care a lot about. So I just want to quickly give you some housing cost 101. In Utah, the cost of a house, about 1/3 of it is the land, 20 to 25% is the land. The rest, the large other is the construction costs, which is materials and labor. And then there's a profit margin. And a lot of people forget about the profit margin. So what are some things we can do as the city to actually address this issue? One is we have to recognize that just on a per square foot basis, as more people live in the city, the cost per square foot of land is more expensive. And so you need to provide smaller options. When Provo started, a lot of our houses were smaller and closer together, and it provided more of a community feel. And we need to provide some options like that again. The second thing we can do is address the construction costs. And there's a lot we can do around code requirements and zoning. And the third thing we can do is profitability. We need to work with smaller developers because large developing companies have profit margin requirements. And so if we enable small businesses and side hustle developers, they have less of a profit requirement. So those are some things we can do.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question and then open it up to you guys. Okay, so if you have questions, I'll ask you to ask them briefly so that we have time to answer. But this is a question maybe related to housing, but we have 35,000 students at BYU. We don't know that not all of them live in Provo. But we also have, we don't really know the numbers exactly, but somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 UVU students who also prefer to live in Provo. So the question is really, this is a very significant, sizable population that also doesn't tend to vote in municipal elections. So my question is, how do you see the Provo City Council's responsibilities towards the student population, and how do you balance that responsibility with the responsibility to citizens, residents here who are, old-time residents who are not here just for a few years? And sorry, Sally is the first one. Yeah, sorry.
I think we absolutely have a responsibility to all these, young people, some of them kids, 18 years old, but it's not like a one-way road where it's just a responsibility where we only take care of them. I think there's so much opportunity for that to come back to us, whether it's, again, young people graduating from this institution and coming back and investing and being long-term members of our community, I think is a huge benefit to us. So while I do think it is ultimately a responsibility, even and maybe especially if they don't vote, that it can be massively beneficial to us. So as I was thinking about what's maybe my number one thing for Provo, I think we can make this the greatest college town in America. And when I say college town, I don't just mean make it great for the students, a fun place for them to live, but fundamentally one of these Ann Arbor, Michigans, UNC Chapel Hill, North Carolina, these places where people come to live and retire because the community is vibrant and thriving and exciting and progressing. And I think we can have all of those things as we invest in taking care of the students. And I think as we make life better for them, whether it's commutability, whether it's, mixed use housing, I think all of those things will benefit us in terms of building a thriving and amazing community here. And I think Provo can become, and it's pretty close, but I think it can become even more well known as one of the greatest college towns in the entire United States.
Okay, well, one thing, and hear me out. BYU does have a massive amount of money, and they do have a tremendous amount of developable space. So do I feel like I need to prioritize BYU housing over the existing residents? I don't. I think that that's not wise, and I think there needs to be a lot more pushback towards BYU and BYU students. At the same time, there needs to be collaboration. I supported the rezoning of everything north of 500 North for higher density student housing, and you will see me supporting that where it makes sense. and with the collaboration of the residents. But I do not believe at all that we need to support BYU students turning family neighborhoods into student housing. I also think it's very important to separate the distinction between BYU students and young single professionals. And that's something that we have really we haven't clearly defined that. Oftentimes we confuse and say young single professionals, they're living in the same area, or it's the same thing as students. It's not true. I live in Southeast Provo, and one thing I've come to learn in 10 years is the absolute necessity that we have to attract and retain the young single professional demographic. For purely selfish reasons, it is good for us to keep them. So let me give you an example of my record. My record when we had in Southeast Provo, we had a bunch of developable land on the west side of State Street. It is in the general plan and it says increase the zoning, do different things, build a community with enough parking and things like that, and developmental agreements to promote affordable housing and ownership long-term for young single professionals. And you will see me probably promoting that when we look at the mall development and other ideas like that. So that's all I'm going to say, is that we need to separate those two things. I do support BYU housing, but not at the cost of the residents. And I do think there needs to be a little bit more accountability for BYU to house our own students.
When I was telling you my story earlier about going to Occidental College in California, the second part of that story is I came back from my mission, decided to transfer to BYU because, and I'm glad I did because I was able to marry my wife Rachel. So I went to BYU and I got my degree in economics. And when I got back from my mission, this was after the financial crash of 2008. And my dad and grandpa are in the audience. Hopefully they don't mind me telling this story, but they lost their home during the great housing crash. And they hit some very difficult economic times. And when I decided to transfer, so I lost my scholarship because I was good enough to play at a D3 school. I wasn't good enough to play BYU football. So I lost my scholarship. I came to BYU and I remember my grandpa, who's 89 and back in the room, he gave me $100 bill and said, good luck. And so I drove from Arizona to BYU and that's all I had. And so I definitely experienced this state of being welcomed by Provo as a community, despite having very little to contribute to the community. And as a result of that contribution, I feel like I've been able to give back a lot. I got a degree, got a good job. I volunteered in lots of local things, from the Planning Commission to the Utah Valley Refugees to Centro Hispano, where I helped our Latin American members of our community help find jobs by teaching them professional skills. And so I think all of our BYU students, it's easy to see them as they are, but they're our future generation. And so I think we need to see them as such and collaborate with them as such. I do agree that one of the big challenges that Provo faces is we have almost an infinite amount of demand for housing from students and at BYU or UVU or people who just want that community. And I don't want to see it as a this or that. I think we need to recognize it just as a reality and then have a strategy to deal with it. We need a lot more student housing or housing for people earlier in their life and at lower income demographics so that they can live closer to campus and places they want to live. And I think by recognizing it as a system and solving it that way, we can also protect neighborhoods, because I also hear all the time the concern that my neighborhood has become a rental for 7 or 8 renters. And so I think that's how we have to think about it. It shouldn't be either or. We need to find the solutions that solve it.
Right. Questions from the audience? Meredith.
So this.
I don't know everyone's name. I just happen to know. I'm sorry. I know your name.
This kind of builds on a question that George asked, which was like sticking to your principles. I kind of want to ask about the flip side of that. Like if you could share an example of a time when you were persuaded by new information or new perspectives to change your mind and to realize that the right thing was actually not what you initially thought was the right thing. I'd love to hear examples of that.
So I'm sorry, I've lost track.
I think it's probably my turn.
I think it's your turn.
I still want to do something.
For that, yeah, I'm going to make a sort of judgment call. If the question sounds like it merits 2 minutes, if it's a sort of, do you support this or that, I might keep it shorter, but I think that's a 2-minute question.
So a good example, great question. A good example of this was when I was on the Planning Commission, Fuego Fridays, which is a dance club that is a lot of college students in our Latin American community goes to. It's on Friday nights. The police department came to the Planning Commission and requested that we revoke their conditional use permit and essentially not allow them to keep operating that as a dance club. It's also being used under the same conditional use permit as an event center for quinceañeras. And so when I initially saw the police's data and the case they're presenting, it seemed quite weak. The amount of data they had, the way they collected, it sounded like a lot of just like officers saying, you know, that thing's annoying on a Friday night, and so we need to solve it. And given that I think the Latin American community is very underrepresented in Provo politics, I was very skeptical of the initial case that was presented. And so I helped, you know, through the dialogue, make a lot of additional asks of the Provo Police Department to come back with and better track their data and come back. And there were some anomalies in how they were tracking their data and what they were attributing to Fuego Fridays. And we also worked to help address some of the concerns without revoking the conditional use permit, like adding security guards in the parking lot and adding lighting. And so this was a good example of collaborating. Well, it turns out another 6 months later, the police department came back with a lot better data. And it might have actually been the third time, but later they came back with a lot clearer data that this was really a community safety issue. And it changed my mind. And I realized we needed to do something about Fuego Fridays in order to protect community safety. And so we ended up revoking it for Fuego Fridays, but we did a good compromise where we allowed Epic Event Center, the one that does the quinceañeras, to maintain their conditional use permit. So that was a good example of me changing my mind.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am very proud of the fact that I do not vote straight party lines when I go to vote. I pride myself in being someone who's open and able to listen to the merits on either side. There's been many a time where, you know, I've maybe received a ballot in the mail and gone to support a candidate who I sort of think I identify with for some reason, whether it's a party reason or otherwise, and then gone into discussions. My husband, who's here, like the greatest sounding board I have, and convinces me otherwise on a lot of things. He's a very smart person. And so I've had many experience on my own ballot as I'm looking to vote. As soon as I, you know, dig a little bit deeper, whether it's look into someone's sort of, you know, stance on things, or just spend a little bit of time, or even watch a debate when it comes to, you know, a governor race or something like that, or Senate race. So many a time have switched my vote, I think, based off of sort of research and putting in, I think, the hard work is a good way to do it. And then again, I have a lot of experience in the workplace as well, having to admit that I am wrong on my initial stance. I'm entering into that right now. I made a decision on my company buying a piece of software. It's looking like it's going to be the wrong piece of software, and I'm going to have to put my name on that and say, I'm the person who got us into this mess, and we're going to have to somehow get our way out of it. So maybe back to the kind of courage example, like it does take courage. It takes just, I think, not even courage, but just sort of releasing yourself from that fear of like being judged or having people be angry at you. And again, that's something that I've learned a lot in my job, which has been hard for me. Like I never saw myself as someone in finance, like for that reason. But it's been a good experience. So lots of personal experience, I think, changing my mind on where I stand based off of hard work as the primary one. And then in the workplace all the time, having to raise my hand and say, hey, that decision actually looks like it's the wrong one. It was me, so I'll go and fix it.
Okay, if I have time, I'll mention two. I already mentioned one briefly, so I'll talk about it. But one was, you know, in Southeast Provo, we were talking about zoning enforcement. We knew that we had a significant number of houses that were illegal. There was a lot of conflict. A lot of it had to do with some of the students and young single adults in our neighborhood. I changed my mind. I remember when we had a meeting and I called a lot of old time neighbors in my ward, and I got together and I said, you know what? I think that we might need to look at some zoning changes and do some things to incorporate and accommodate the young single adult demographic. And it was a hard decision, and it was maybe hard a little bit to get people on my side, but I did it because I recognized, I went through the process and I realized this is best for our community. On the second, and it's kind of the opposite of Jeff, and it will go back to the Republican endorsement. The Republicans decided to endorse candidates, not nominate, but endorse candidates. And I come from a family with a very diverse voting background. Everybody in my family is different. I'm a registered Republican, but everybody in my family is different. We all get along. It's a great family culture. And I remember when they first announced it, I thought, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. But it is important to keep an open mind, because when I went through that process, I realized they were never asking for a pledge. They just wanted an agreement that you would be a good person and that you would be genuine, that you would respect your values, and that you would be genuine, and that you would be honest and good. And so I did accept that Republican endorsement, and I don't feel bad about it because I know I didn't sell out. I didn't sign any pledge. I didn't do anything like that. I committed to being a good representative in our community and being true to what I represent.
That's in the back.
I know sometimes there can feel like a bit of a communication gap between what's going on in the council and the people that live within the district. So how do you plan to help bridge that communication gap with District 2? And then on the flip side, how do you plan to advocate for the specific needs of District 2 with the broader city council?
Okay, I keep forgetting who's,
No idea.
I think Jeff went first last time.
I did go
So I think it's your turn.
Could be. Okay,
Let's do 1 minute on this.
okay, 1 minute. I suspect we do not have a lack of communication tools, right? We've got social media, we've got tons of way to push messages to people. I have felt that myself, you know, whether it's things having to do with community or school, but I'm like, why do I feel like I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes? I suspect it's not because of lack of tools. I suspect it's because people are nervous to say, and that there's probably things preventing people from saying things that are unpopular, back to our earlier point. So I think, you know, I maybe I do have a little bit of fear of sort of saying, but I'm very committed to, I think, transparency. And, you know, whether it be unpopular or whether it be difficult, right, to communicate the messiness behind a decision. I think that's what we should commit ourselves to, and anybody in government should be dedicated. And, you know, if I'm in here as well, dedicated to being clear, being transparent, even if the message is hard, because oftentimes it is, but the confusion, I think, is way worse than the clarity, even if the clarity is difficult for some people.
Well, Rachel's back here and she's part of our new neighborhood districting program. You know, when we meet together, we meet as a district too. You know, we meet as an entire district and we really do have a diverse district. I think out of all of the 5 districts, ours is the most different. We start from all the way from Springville, all the way up to Rock Canyon Park. And the needs and the things that are happening in those different areas are so different. I love the new forum that we have where we meet here at the building and that we have staff come and report to our neighborhood meetings. I miss some of our neighborhood meetings that we used to have on the local level. When we used to meet in our schools or at people's homes, when we used to meet on a monthly basis to get that kind of communication. I wonder if there is some way that we can make more of a hybrid situation so that we can have more transparency, more interaction, and more communication. What I would do is just tremendous amount of, like I said, communication with the residents and trying to set up local meetings between the individual older neighborhoods.
Question. So when I kicked off the campaign, we did a community Easter egg hunt, and we started off by buying 600 eggs and 500 people showed up. So we had to go back and buy another 1,000 eggs. And that was really interesting because like I said, you know, in serving in city government, you're on the planning commission. And while everyone here is incredible, you start to notice a pattern that a lot of similar people show up. You see a lot of similar faces. And it's a certain profile person who, you know, has the time and the ability to come out to things like this. But on that Easter egg hunt, I saw a lot of people in our district that I'd never met before. And so that gave me the idea that I think doing community events as a city councilor is really, really important. People will show, it's like I'm on the activity committee in my ward. And if we learned that when you do a trunk or treat outside, or people show up, then if you ask them to come in the church, people will show up to different things. And so if you have a barbecue, you're going to get people to show up, different people to show up to that versus a planning commission meeting. I also think it's really, really important to be accessible via text and call all the time.
I want to know if you will listen to the neighbors. Recently, our neighborhood had an opportunity to voice our opinion on a development in the only open space left on our southeast bench. The development was for 110 single-family homes, 10 feet apart, 20 feet front yard, 20 feet backyard. This is not sustainable for us if you want real family there and kids playing and things. But anyway, I know there were other facilities that were going to be built there as well. But 90% of the neighborhood did not want this. I've lived in the neighborhood for 30, 40 years. And we wanted something further apart. We wanted some space for the kids to grow on and play in the front yard or backyard. Yet there was only one member on the planning commission that was willing to suggest some changes, and only 2 city council members that voted against this, against the development. Would you be willing to listen to the neighborhood and the people that have lived there for so long and know what the neighborhood needs?
Okay, let's do 1 minute.
1 minute?
Yeah.
Yes, this specific example, I wrote a letter to the city council and I said, don't vote on it. Don't vote on it yet until you do a better job. It needs to be far more beautiful. You need to have far more you need to have more neighborhood consensus. You need to have more access to the mountains and the trail. They blocked off the trail to Slate Canyon in that process, or it was so limited. There were so many things. The bar was so low. I never would have cast a vote for that in that position. I will give Jess a little bit of a hard time because I know that the planning commission did support that, but I didn't. I don't think it's a good idea. There are so many examples of this happening in our community, and it's not right. It's not even successful. Look at Southeast Provo and some of that development that we've had down there. Imagine what it would look like if we would have listened to the neighbors 20 years ago when they said, give us just a little bit more yard, plant a few more trees, give us a little bit more accessibility, give us a little bit more space. What would it look like if there would have been a little bit more collaboration or consistency? Thanks.
Thanks for the question. So yeah, I was on the planning commission around that vote. I think I have a different purview as a planning commissioner versus as a city councilor. As a city councilor, you're fundamentally a representative of the people. As a planning commission, you're part of the administration and you're asked to evaluate things against the general plan and some specific criteria. I would have probably taken a different approach to that particular property if I was a city councilor. That said, I think there are 2 separate issues in your question. One is, should the land have been sold at all? I probably would have pushed against selling the land at all and hoped that it could have been used differently. However, once the decision to decide to sell the land, I think the idea that we need to always have bigger yards or space, again, that's all cost. Even those homes that you're complaining about are going to be for somewhere between $600,000 to $700,000, maybe $500,000 if we're lucky. These are still very hard to buy homes. And so that is the challenge. Like, I agree it would be nice, but there is a cost to all those things. And so I think you just need to look at those costs. And I think the development has a good range of homes for people who are maybe need something a little bit less expensive. And then there's up as you get closer to the mountain, more space and more expensive homes. And I thought it was a good balance. That said, it's not a perfect project and I would have done more to change it.
Yeah, I would say my absolute favorite part about putting my name down on this ballot has been the people who have emailed me. They have just been such like nuggets of insight into the lives of other people that are not myself. You know, I did not know just like how painful the problem of noise of, you know, youths who adjust the mufflers on their car can be to someone without sort of these little pieces of information that I've had. And so it's just been an absolute joy to get this sort of feedback from people and to hear what it is that matters. It's been my favorite part of this experience so far. We talked a little bit about tools that we have. One of the reasons I went to go work for this company called Qualtrics based in Provo, you know, it's the survey company where it just like sends you a survey and you can give your input. We have amazing tools for community members to give that input because there might be sort of this sentiment, like I might be meeting with all my mom friends and we're like, yeah, what about this? What about that? Like, how do we get that back to people who are making decisions? And I think there are really clever tools where that can sort of information can be passed along. We call it experience data, but the experience data of residents is so important. And I think we do have the ability to get it.
Well, you support reinstating the elected neighborhood chair.
Well, 30 seconds.
Can you ask that again? Sorry.
Would you support reinstating the elected neighborhood chair program?
Well, that's a tough question. I would listen. I don't have a strong point of view on that. I admittedly, I know there's a lot of history there and it's something that I would go talk to a lot of people and try to understand. I think there are pros and cons to each situation, but I'll just be honest and I don't know.
Yeah, I think since we just talked about listening, and that's a very specific topic, I'd probably have to come back to you and get more information from you on what was that program and what did it benefit. I think, you know, as we get deeper and deeper into the neighborhoods, like I think about District 2, and there's just really unique different neighborhoods. You know, I went from townhome land, which I loved my experience there, and that's very different from, you know, where I am with a lot of retirees now. So I think our neighborhoods within District 2 are pretty diverse. So impact at like a neighborhood level, but without knowing a ton about that program, it'd be an example where, and those of you who have emailed me know that when I email back, I mostly ask questions for more information because I think we need that.
Yes, with some adjustments. When we switched over, the neighbors used to elect their neighborhood representatives who would then report to the city council. And when we switched over to this district program, that stopped. You didn't have an opportunity to elect your neighborhood representative. The neighborhood representative was appointed by the city council. And I was actually the elected neighborhood representative at the time. And so I thought that I would naturally transition into the district executive board. But the problem is somebody didn't like what I wanted to say. And so there was all of this, trying to get people out that it's just not fair. It's not the democratic process. We can do a hybrid things where neighborhoods that don't have neighborhood chairs, we can appoint people, but neighborhoods that are really active and really want their voice to be heard, it needs to be elected, not appointed. That's not how the system is supposed to work.
In fact,
I have a tough question.
You are the questioner, or you can ask the question, but I'm gonna have one more question after this, and then I'm gonna give them a closing statement. So go ahead.
Okay, so this is a question for Jeff. Hopefully it's quick. You brought up the Easter egg hunt. It did not go well. There wasn't enough food. There were kids who got turned away with no eggs. So the question, I decided that day, I'm never gonna vote for that guy. But now being here, being here and hearing your answers, I want to keep an open mind. So let me ask, what did you learn from the experience and what would you have done differently?
I mean, wow, thanks for the question. I felt so bad. I did not, whenever you throw an event, you think no one's gonna come, and I assumed 600 eggs, maybe we'll have 30 people show up, 500 people showed up. So we went as fast as possible to Costco and tried to grab another 1,000 eggs. And I personally went around trying to give eggs to the kids, and I felt really bad. What I learned is people show up if you throw good events at different places, and you'll meet different members of the community, and that it's better to aim high than maybe too low. But again, I was honestly thinking we'd get 30 people. So that was a really good lesson, and I'm sorry that you had a poor experience.
I thought it was great. I'm voting for you. And when's your father, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, shots fired.
Okay, last question. Yeah.
I'm just concerned sometimes with overconfidence, about really difficult issues. Is there, I don't want to call it a weakness, but an element of collaboration you need to be effective? What is it that you would seek for in collaborators that you may need to fill in, or not a weakness, but something you're just not really good at?
And we'll give 1 minute each. Sally, yeah.
Yeah, we sort of have a principle like in our household that you're not allowed to have a strong stance unless you can articulate the other side. So regardless of what the topic is, whether it's political or not political, but the stronger your stance, the more that you have to be able to articulate the other side. And we try to sort of practice that discourse in our house. Maybe didn't come as naturally to me. My husband is a great sort of negotiator and debater. He's much better than I am. So it's a bit of a scary process for me, but I believe in that as a principle. I believe that you always need to understand the other side. I believe that elected officials need to be listening, and they especially need to listen to the people who don't agree with them. And the person yesterday who I knew would not agree with what I said, and I think maybe spat some of the cookies that I had back out at me. It was very difficult to do that. But I'm grateful for that discourse. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live in an environment, and in Provo, we do have such great diversity of thought. And I think we can always hear the other side because it does exist here.
My personality is I'm a data gatherer. I'm a data gatherer, and I do not think I think when you have a hard decision or when something is really important or when it's going to affect people's lives in such a significant way, you need to gather so much data and you need to get so many opinions and you need to talk to professionals and people. I don't think it's a sign of lack of confidence. I actually think it's a sign of confidence of saying that I am going to go out and I'm going to reach for everybody's opinion. Probably even will call George on occasion. But that is, I just can't agree with you more than that. I like the principle of committees, of councils, and getting everybody's information, particularly the people who will affect the most. If you're making a decision or a zone change, you better talk to every single person in that area. You better talk to everybody who it's going to affect. Call everybody you can. I'm grateful for that question because I'm a big believer in that.
So my business is we build a software application. We've got many thousands of users. And in the past, I built apps with millions of users. And one of the things you learn sometimes, you think you've got a great idea and you build this feature and 0 people use it. And that's happened to me a lot. And so I've learned a few things. One is you need to listen, gather data from a lot, I agree with what has been said. But another thing too is you also need to sometimes go small. Going big from the very beginning, even if you've collected a lot of information, you feel like you're really confident, you don't actually know until you run the experiment or you actually do something. And so that's something that I would like to see done more in Provo is what I call lean, which is how do you run the smallest, most viable experiment? Again, it's not perfect for every decision, but I think we could do a lot more piloting, a lot more experimentation in the city. And experimentation is a great way to solve complex problems because your theories are great until they meet reality. As far as specific types of people, again, as the CEO of my business, it's a software business. I am not an engineer by trade. So I have a lot of engineers on my team. And so I have to oftentimes work with people who have technical knowledge that I don't, but then synthesize it against many perspectives, the business perspective, our customer perspective. And so I hope to continue to do that in the city.
All right. I would now like you to offer a closing statement. You may have already prepared some thoughts. I'll just encourage you to do something that maybe is a little bit uncomfortable for you because you're all such nice people. But I would like you to push for yourself. I think we would like to hear why you are the one that we should vote for. And we'll give you 2 minutes. Is that okay? And I think we were at Hannah.
Oh, I gotta go first.
Yes.
Times.
Did you go first on the opening statement?
Yes, it's fine. I don't mind.
Do you want to switch it around?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine. Going into this, I would say actions speak louder than words. Especially when you're in a campaign, actions speak louder than campaign words. And it's hard trying to get that information out to everybody. But I think that if you were to look at my actions, you know, what I supported when I was on the neighborhood chair, how I have listened to my neighborhood representatives, what letters I have written to the city council, what I've supported, actions speak louder than words. The amount of time that we have spent trying to preserve our community, to listen to our community, those things matter more. It's our record. You know, when I am on your side, what I want to know is how is my opponent different? You might have a whole bunch of wonderful people up there, but how are you going to vote? Because it comes down to how we're going to vote. That's the indicator. That's what's going to affect your life. And it's my record. You'll be able to find that in my record as a neighborhood chair. You'll be able to find that record as that Jeff had on the planning commission. Harder a little bit for Sally, but I think that's why I think you should vote for me because I have the best record. I have the best record for public service. I have the best record for the amount of time I've spent working for the community. When we talk about development and voting records, when new development has come through, I usually always support the neighborhood and hear their voice. I consistently respect the voice of the residents and try and find a solution. I do not ever go when you have 98% of the community or 100% or 80% of the community and even staff members to say this isn't a good idea and I vote against you. I'm always loyal and I always hear your voice. I think you should vote for me too because we have a narrow window in this next 4 years of very important projects coming up like the mall redevelopment or the west side. We have the Olympics coming in. We have our natural resources. I just think I'm positioned to really affect and preserve those areas in the next 4 years in a very small window.
So I think the most important thing when you elect a city councilor or any politician is what do they get done for you? And I think when it comes to the city council, there's a few things that make someone effective to getting things done. One is that you're able to work with people, even people that you maybe disagree with, to find common ground and make progress. The second thing is that you're a good problem solver. You're able to synthesize a lot of different perspectives and data and come up with solutions. And the third thing is you work really hard. And I think in my life, I demonstrate all three of those quite strongly. I've had the privilege of attending, like I said, a highly, highly liberal arts college in California as a young, little Mormon guy and making some best friends that are still my friends to this day. Going to Africa, completely different culture, some of my best friends from this day. Working in consulting at the Texas Department of Transportation with people that were really hostile to us and coming up with solutions that saved Texas hundreds of millions of dollars. And time again, I'm able to work with people who are different from me, find solutions and get things done. And that's what I'm committed to do. Is just like I worked very, very hard to start a company from nothing that now has 15 employees, which is still small and we're still going to grow, and hundreds or thousands of users and millions of dollars of revenue. Like I'm going to bring that skill set and my background to Provo to get things done for District 2. And I commit to that. And I commit to listen to everyone and come up with the best solutions. But we've talked about a lot of things that need to happen, like the part on Slate Canyon. Like I will get that done. I'll find a way to get that done. I'm someone who gets things done. If there's anything else about me, like that's something that will happen. And so if you want something that'll get things done, and that's something I can commit to. I'm feeling like that's a long minute. Okay.
That's 2.
Oh, 2 minutes. Okay. Well, there we go.
Yeah, I think earlier I mentioned the yin yang symbol. I think you'll be hard pressed to find a yin yang as strong as me. I am smart and I am capable, but I'm the first person who will admit that I don't know something. The first person to open up my ears, but also be able to speak out. I know when to move fast. I know when to move slow. I believe that government is all about the balance and being a balancing force. I think you'll be hard pressed to find somebody who sort of plays in all those things sort of with that balance. I think this is incredible that you are all here. This is so exciting that we are all participating in this sort of public discourse, civic discourse. It's been the best experience for me and I'm really grateful to be a part of it. If I could ask everybody here, I think one of the biggest things is we don't have enough people out there voting, especially in primaries. So if I give everybody a challenge here, it's one of those like, go get 10 people to sign up or send a text message, but go get 10 people to vote, whether they vote for me or Jeff or Hannah. I think it would be awesome if all of us can go out there and get people to vote, get people to speak up their opinion, be heard, say their side, stand for their side. I'm grateful to be a part of that. And this has been such a cool experience. So thank you all for being here.
I want to just say a few words of thanks to these 3 candidates. And I just want to say that this takes a lot of courage to run. It takes a lot of courage to stand in front of us and you knew some questions, I guess, but you didn't know exactly what I was going to ask. And you've all done exceptionally well. And I just want to honor what it means to make that decision to run. And I want to thank you for coming. And I just want to echo something that Sally just said. I really think if first of all, if we could bottle this and sell it across the country, it really would save our country a lot of heartache, because this was remarkably civil. It was remarkably informed. And I feel like it was very helpful for the democratic process here in Provo. But you really carry the torch now as voters to go out and inform and encourage your neighbors and to continue this kind of dialogue that we've had here to help us be a better city. I can only say, as in my 8 years of experience on the council, city councils make better decisions when more people are engaged civically. That kind of goes back to what Ben's question was getting at. I just know that I'm able to make a better decision when I hear from more people. And if it is only the same 3 people I'm hearing from, that's not actually ideal, right? So encourage one another and continue to be as engaged as you are for being here tonight. Thank you. So let's give these folks a round of applause. And
Abstain.